I'm going to show you how to do some hand sewing stitches, but first I'm going to start by showing you how to thread your needle and how to tie a knot. And now it sounds pretty simple, but sometimes when you're doing hand sewing, there's several things that can go wrong. Firstly, your thread can get all tangled and twisted, and you want to make sure you're doing it in a way that keeps the thread from doing that. So what I'm going to do is thread my needle, and also length of thread is important. You don't want it to be too long or too short. So what I usually do is take my thread and stretch my arm out. I can't even see. I stretch my arm out and I measure to my shoulder, and that's about how long I will do my thread. So to avoid getting your thread all tangled, I thread my needle, and I'm going to take the two ends of the thread and put them together on the end. And I need to separate the thread a couple times. I'm going to go like this between my fingers, and when I do that, the thread kind of untwists, and by untwisting the thread, you're preventing it from knotting. Okay, so now the two ends are together. I have my needle here. I'm going to get to the end of my thread. So I have them both here, and I'm going to trim them so they're even. Okay, so you can see the two pieces. When I tie my knot, I grab the two ends with my right hand, and then I take my left hand and wrap them around into a loop. So I have a loop for my thread, okay? And I'm gonna hold that loop with my left hand, and I'm gonna take the ends of the thread and put it through the loop. But then I'm gonna put it through it several times. And this, every time I put it through the loop, I'm making my knot bigger. Okay, so I do it quite a few times. So now I have all these little loops around my thread. With my right hand, I'm going to hold those loops. I'm holding the loops and I'm holding the end of the thread with my two fingers, and then I'm going to pull with the left. So then you end up with a bigger knot kind of towards the end of your thread, which is where you want it. And then I'm going to trim the excess off. Okay, so then when you're going to start to sew, usually you hide the knot on the inside of the fabric or inside the hat or some place that you're not going to see it. For now, I'm just going to put it right through on this side. Okay, so you see how my thread, it got looped. It's all loopy. So I'm going to pull them until the thread comes through, and then I'm going to take it and pull all the way till I get back to my needle. And that's going to help avoid more loops. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but we'll try. So I'm just going to do a few stitches here. I'm going to go in and out of the fabric, and this is just a basic running stitch. And a running stitch is like a basting stitch. It's just a quick temporary stitch. You could use it to hold something down inside of your hat as well. And you see how I put a bunch of stitches onto my needle at one time. That way I don't have to go through each time I'm making a stitch. Okay, so now I can pull the thread through, and I want to say I'm going to stop here. Okay, so now I need to tie my knot. How do you do that? How do you easily do that? And one way I like to do it is right where the thread comes out, I grab a little bit of fabric on my needle. Okay, so it's just looped right through, and I'm going to pull, and as the loop gets smaller, don't pull all the way, I'm going to put my needle through the loop and then pull the thread through that. Okay, and then I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to grab a little bit of fabric right where that thread is coming out, and I'm going to pull this loop closed, and as it gets smaller, I'm going to put my needle through the loop and then pull. And so then I have a nice knot. I didn't have to struggle to make it happen. The thread is tight on both sides and it's not going to come out. So now I'm going to do a basting stitch or running stitch, and sometimes they're called even basting or uneven basting, and it's just the length of the stitch. And what I'm going to do first is draw a line for my stitching line. So I don't want to just go all crazy. I want to make a straight line to stitch on. So I use my pencil and I use my clear ruler to make that. So I have a knot in my thread, and I'm just going to go in and out of the fabric once. Okay, so that's anchoring your knot. It's anchored. And to do an even basting would be to do a stitch and a space that is exactly the same length. Okay, so I can measure while I'm going. I can see as I'm making my stitches that the stitch and the space is the same distance. Okay, so I'll do a couple more so you can see that. So it's just going in and out of the fabric and following the line as I do it. So this is the even basting. And just to show you again how to do that knot, once I get to the end, I'm going to grab a little bit of fabric and pull my loop. And as the loop gets smaller, I'm going to put the needle through the loop and pull. And I do that 2 times. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to do a back stitch. So when you first put your needle through the fabric to anchor your knot, what you're doing is actually creating a back stitch. So what I'm going to do is from where the thread is coming out, I'm going to go back to where the knot is and make a second stitch. And that is essentially going backwards on itself, creating a back stitch. So how you create a whole length of back stitches is you go into the fabric 1 stitch length up, and then you come back halfway, okay, the halfway point of where that stitch was, and you do 1 stitch length up. Oops. There. Okay. And then to continue, you go from where the fabric's coming out, 1 stitch back, or half stitch back to where the last one started, and then a whole one going forward. So it's kind of like doing 1 stitch or 2 stitches up, 1 stitch back. Okay, so what it's doing is doubling up each of these stitches. It's not like a running stitch where you just go in and out. This one is going back on itself, creating a doubly strong stitch. So 1 stitch back, on the bottom 2 stitches forward. And you try to start right where the last one ended so that they don't overlap, but they look like they're continuous, like a sewing machine stitch. So if you flip it over, you can see they're kind of overlapping on each other, and then on the top they just have nice little stitches. So here's where the stitches get a little more complicated. I'm going to show you how to do a catch stitch, which is a hemming stitch, and it's usually made so that the fabric can kind of still move. It's not totally nailed down to each other. I've anchored my knot, and what I've done here is created kind of a fake hem. So this piece is folded over and finished as if it were the hem. And this is the garment, with this being the outside that we would see. And we want to make sure to try and not see any of the stitches from the outside. So what I'm going to do is take a stitch, but this time with the needle, the stitch is going to go in the opposite direction. So it's going to go away from me. The needle is going the opposite direction that I am sitting. And then we're going to come down over the flap and maybe come down about a ½ inch. And you're going to go into the fabric again with the needle away from you. And then I'm going to come back over on this piece, which is the outside of the garment, and take a little stitch. It's always a little stitch, but make sure the needle goes away from you, and that's what creates this little X, or this is called a catch stitch or a cross stitch. Okay, so what you're going to also want to try and do as you're creating this hemming stitch is you're trying to space these each out evenly. And this stitch is always going to be just above the fold line, and this one will always be about a ½ inch down from the fold line. Okay, so I'm here and I'm going to go this way again. So your needle always goes the opposite direction that the stitch is going in. And if you're having a hard time measuring this out to be even, then you can do a couple marks onto your fabric to get a sense of how to space them. Okay, so that's how my stitch works. But then if you wanted to kind of practice, then try to just mark these. You can see I already started, but you can mark these dots to give you a place to evenly go. So you see these are all spaced out about the same, and these are spaced out the same but in alternating areas. So this is the last of the complicated stitches we're going to do. It's called a slip stitch, and I've created what would be like two pieces of fabric coming together to create an invisible stitched seam, more like a sewing machine stitch, but this is how you do it if you are doing it by hand. So I'm going to anchor my knot from underneath this fold. I don't know if you can see that. And I just don't want the knot to show, so I'm coming from under it. And then what I have to do to create a slip stitch, you're trying to make this stitch as invisible as possible, so that makes it hard to demonstrate. But where the thread is coming out of the fabric, it's right at the fold, and then now I have to go across the other fold exactly in the same spot and come upward. So I'm actually stitching in the fold crease. This working. Okay, in the fold crease and then up. And then what I'm going to do next is go straight over to the other fold in the crease. So I don't want to go over the top of the fabric at all. I want to stitch right into that crease line. I'm going to pull. And then I'm going to go from this side to the other side. It's just the same thing over and over again. But it's kind of hard to grasp as you're doing it. So you see where the needle's going is right where the fold is. And up. And then I'm going to go over to the side. If you go up at all, like if you don't go straight across, then you're going to see your thread. So you want to try to go exactly straight where the thread is coming out of the fabric. You can see the struggle with the thread. As it knots up, it just happens every time. So be patient. Try to unknot it. So you can see it's starting to, as I go along, you can kind of, now it's black thread, but if it matched, you wouldn't be able to see it at all. Okay, so I'm going to come from this side over, straight across, and up. Over to this side and up. And this is good. This is probably a stitch you're going to use to finish the hats, especially the fabric or the edges of the hats, where you can't really get in there with the sewing machine. One way, if you can't quite understand how that's stitched, I like to do a little diagram. So it's kind of like stitching up the fold, straight across, up, straight across, up, straight across. So it kind of is like a ladder, missing one of the edges of the ladder. But that's what the stitch looks like as you go up that fold. So imagine the fold coming right through the middle of those stitches. And that's kind of what is going on with the thread.